Hey folks, Dave here, back in Studio B, and long day today. Did a lot of work today at the rink, and then had some friends over for dinner, and now jumping on tonight just to say hi here. I'm just going to turn up my volume a little bit in my headphones, and I had a real different topic tonight, and I actually went live on Facebook tonight as well. Let me get my my banner up there, okay, and edit this banner here. So my question is, what if you woke up tomorrow as your 13-year-old self, right? And had all the knowledge of today. I spelled knowledge wrong. Hang on a second. All right. How about that? So, here's the question. What if you woke up tomorrow as your 13-year-old self and had all the knowledge of today? And this was actually a something I saw on YouTube. I don't know if it was Reddit or something like that. And that was the question that was asked. And they read all the answers off. And I thought I'd see what you guys had to say at this. I actually was up, for a couple hours that night thinking this through. Like, okay, if this would happen, what would I do? Okay, so I'm going back to, we're going back to 1980 for me. It's 1980, and if any of the people that I went to high school with happen to pop on tonight on Facebook, you're in the same boat as me. It's 1980. Okay, so tonight you go to bed. It's 2023, July 2023, and you go to bed. And you wake up in the morning, and you're in the house that you lived in at 13 years old. Okay? You're 13 years old again. But your head is your 56 years old self. What do you do? What's the first thing that you do? Let me know. I think this is a fun discussion to have. And I thought about what I would do. So you wake up in bed and you're like, holy cow, what's going on here? And maybe you get downstairs and you look at the newspaper or the news or whatever it is, and it's July 22nd, whenever you were 13. For me, it's 1980. Now, don't get me wrong, 1980 was fantastic for all kinds of reasons. The music was good. The Van Halen albums that come out, Zeppelin, Rush, Sabbath had some great albums in 1980. So it's 1980, you wake up, the USA Olympic team. I mean, there was some good things happening in 1980. We had a pretty good World Series, if you will. So you wake up at you're 13 years old. What's the first thing you do? And now, here's kind of my thing, though, is that there's no guarantee, now that you have all the knowledge of, the last 43 years or whatever the heck it is, there's no guarantee that the timeline is going to remain the same. So that's kind of like the underlying question. Is everything going to happen according to the timeline? And I say that because let's just say that you started to place bets on Super Bowls because you knew who won all the Super Bowls. Well, maybe by you placing bets on the Super Bowl and winning them, maybe it causes something to change in this timeline, okay? And so now it changes. So now things are going to be different. Or maybe you do something different and, maybe you, I don't know, something, the butterfly effect. You've heard of the butterfly effect. Because if you go back to when you're your 13-year-old self with all this knowledge in your head, you're not going to do everything exactly the same. So things are going to change, okay? Something's going to be different. So there's no guarantee that the timeline's going to stay the same. But what if it did? Let's play the what if game. What if the timeline stayed the same? And you really couldn't mess that up, at least some of the major events. So now you know what companies are going to do good, what companies are not going to do good, what teams are going to do good, who's going to win. So, maybe you play the stock market. Maybe you bet on some teams. But what would you do? What would you do if you woke up tomorrow with your 13-year-old self? And first off, like a couple people says, like Cleveland baseball fan says, no thanks, I'll pass. And you know something? I'm kind of right there with you. My teenage years were not good. They just weren't. Now, granted, like I said, the music was good and the sports was good, and there was something about having that freedom. Like, you didn't really have to go to work, but you didn't have any money. You didn't have any freedom. I mean, you could go down to the park and play ball or ride your bike or something like that, but because you went independent, I couldn't wait to get out of high school and go to work. Because I was working in high school and I was like, holy cow, I'm making money. I can buy a new guitar, by just going to work. This is great. That's what I'm going to do. But when you're 13, so then I'm thinking of, so here's my thing. I'm 13 and I wake up in my bed and I'm not in a happy place at 13, let me tell you. Even though as good as the music was and the sports, we talked about that, 13 was not a good year for me. And neither were many of the others in my teenage years. So personally, I would not be happy. But like, what would be the first thing you would do? Like I kind of thought that first thing I would do is I would probably call my father. And we don't speak much anymore, just kind of how it worked out. But I would probably talk to him first. And I would just say, look, sit down. I got something to tell you. And just, and try to explain what's going on, and maybe try to convince him by telling him some things that maybe he didn't think I would know, or maybe talk about people at work or something like that he wouldn't have, I wouldn't have any clue who it was at the time. I don't know, but I would, you'd have to talk to somebody. And then the other thing that would suck is you'd have to go back to school. I hated school. So it's like your 13-year-old self, and I don't care. Okay, I have the mind of a 56-year-old, and I have all this knowledge in my head at 13 years old, but you still got to go back to school. Oh, that would suck. That would suck having 5 years of school ahead of you, especially, knowing how much of the stuff in school you actually applied to your whole life. You know what I mean? So you've lived, or at least myself, I've lived, 43 years since I was 13, and I'm going to be, I know what I would use in school and what I wouldn't use in school. That's the thing. It hasn't been easy, but it was better when I got out of high school because I threw those chains off. I didn't have to be there. Now I could go to work and then sink or swim on my own. Just get me out of that friggin' school. And, and I had some fun playing high school hockey or whatever, and then playing in bands, I guess, when I was a teenager. But so many things I would do different, and I think we all would now. I would, now that I'm older now, I would try to put more money aside so when I get older like I am now, I wouldn't have to struggle as much. But when you're younger, you're not thinking that. You're not thinking 40 years down the line. You're thinking, oh, man, this is great. I'm going to just, I got some money. I'm going to buy some beer. Or I'm going to, get a new guitar or something like that. You're not thinking to put money away when you're older. You don't do that till you're older, Well, let's go back to the chat room here. Charles says he would not want to be 13 years old again. I'm kind of surprised at that because a lot, like I said, I'm older with, older body and the whole bit. I'd love to have my 13-year-old body and say, okay, it's nice and healthy now. Let's go to the gym. Let's eat a little bit better, a little bit less McDonald's. You know what I mean? But I guess, with age comes wisdom. And when you're 13, you don't have that wisdom. You're thinking, minute by minute, hour by hour, rather than, hey, what's going to happen down the line? You just don't think that way at 13. But if you were, and I don't know if I'd want to think that way at 13, like the way I'm thinking now at 13. I liked thinking the way I was thinking at 13. Would I want to be an old fuddy-duddy in my head at 13? No, I want to be kind of fun and whatever. But yeah, there's Brian stops in and Noble says, my friend's 13 too. Yes. You wake up as your 13-year-old self back whatever year it was you were 13. So you wake up in bed and you're like, holy cow, I'm back in my teenage room. And you grab the paper and it says, whatever year it is that you were 13, that's what year it is. and everything's the same as when you were 13, except that you have all the knowledge that you have in your head. Charles says, no internet in my entire music collection in my pocket. I would literally die without his entire music collection in his pocket. Yeah, I mean, I remember taking the record player and then putting the speakers in the window and putting the record player on and run downstairs, and we'd be outside hanging out, shooting baskets or whatever it is, and the record would end. I'd run back up and flip the record over. I remember having a boombox and recording tapes and putting them in the boombox, and then batteries would run out. You got to go more batteries, and you didn't have any money as a kid. It's an interesting question. It's like, would you want to go back? And then you'd have, for myself, I'd have 43 years to relive, and with full knowledge of maybe what might happen. Now, I imagine the timeline would be pretty close. I mean, you could probably screw it up somehow by doing something crazy, but I mean, if the timeline was even remotely close. Now, again, you'd probably be okay financially because you could, tell your adult parents or whatever, hey, we need to put money here and make some money, because these companies here, blah, 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 and avoid these companies, and, maybe go to Vegas and make a bet on the Super Bowl or something. So you could probably make a little bit of money that way if you could remember who won all the games and whatever. But again, if you started, putting money in the stocks and started cashing in, that might mess up the stock market too. You don't know what butterfly effect that would have, And John says, I'd save a lot more money and spend less, and that would be in 1980. And I would really enjoy the 5 to 7 years before people had internet in their homes. Interesting. Yeah, well, like I say, if you went back in time, like I said, now you would save the money because now you're thinking, geez, I'm 56 now, and I got to start thinking about trying to wind up my work career at some point, and I need to make sure I have money to do that. But again, at 13, you're not thinking about saving money. You're not thinking about putting money aside for a rainy day. It's just you didn't have much, so you bought a new video game or whatever you did. You were spending the money because you weren't thinking about putting it aside because you didn't have much. You didn't have anything to put aside, and whatever you had, you used on a daily basis for the most part. I never put anything aside. I had a little bit to live off of when I was younger. When I 18 and 19 when I started working, but I never started a savings account or anything till I was much older. And even at work when they said, "Oh yeah, we could take $5 a week out of your paycheck," I'm like, "Yeah, $5 a week. That's so much money." Brian says, my life has been pretty good since I was 13. I think I'll just wake up as my 54-year-old self with bad knees and a reclining hairline tomorrow. Yeah. About that, yeah, that's where we are right now at our age. It is. And Charles says, with this hobby, I curse myself every day for not paying more attention in math class. Yep. But in no way I want to be 13 in 1985. I hear you. I don't know if I'd want to go back either. But it's an interesting question. What if you woke up tomorrow as your 13-year-old self but had all the knowledge that you have today? Would anybody believe you? How would you convince people? How would you convince somebody that, hey, I'm not a 13-year-old kid, that I've lived my life and I have all this stuff to talk about? People would think you were crazy. You'd have to be really careful how you handled yourself. You really would. And man, I would not want to go back to school. I keep saying that. Maybe if I woke up at 18, that might be a little bit more fairer of a question, because I would take my 18-year-old body, which was skinny, and do things quite differently. Not tremendously differently, but I think I would try to take care of the body a little bit more than I did, instead of just enjoying myself with Chinese food. Let's see. Noble says, I had great teenage years. I would do the same thing. In the summer, golf in the mornings and baseball in the afternoon. Yep. I would ride on my bike down to the golf course and play golf. And I remember we'd get on to, the sports store and we'd buy a 6-iron or 4-iron. I mean, I didn't have a matching set of clubs. I just got one here, one there, and built up a collection and barely had enough clubs to hit the ball. But we would go and play golf. Scrounge up $10 to go play 9 holes and then get onto the ballpark and hit balls all day for free. Ride our bikes around town. Didn't have a lot of money to do anything, but we'd ride our bikes around town Maybe drive down to the movies, go to the movies or something like that. No one ever stole our bikes back then. It was kind of neat. But yeah, imagine going back to your 13-year-old self. I mean, I would enjoy some things. I could actually sit back and I'd like to, listen to like a Rush album or something. Like, oh man, that'd be great. Or maybe try to go to a Rush concert or something like that. Relive the 80s all over again. I was a little young in the 80s, but I did live it. By the late 80s, I was pretty much on my own, and financially I could do some things. So, but it wasn't the wild and free of the early 80s, but still the late 80s were kind of crazy. They really were. And Charles is going to go walk the dog. Okay. It's too dark over here to walk the dog. And Thomas says he is 13. Fantastic. Got a youngster in the audience tonight. Michael says, would have learned how to hit a fastball or throw 100 miles per hour. Yeah, I mean, what would you do different? Would you, go try to be in a band? Would you write a hit song? Like maybe look at an Aerosmith song that they wrote after you were 13 and maybe write that song and try to cash in on it? Because they hadn't written it yet, right? They don't know it's coming. So do you go and take somebody else's song and make it your own? Because technically at that point it's not theirs yet, right? Do you become an athlete? What do you do? What do you do? Now that you have all this knowledge in your head, what do you do with that knowledge? And Dwayne stops by here. It's 1980 for you too. Okay, so something I took off the stickers from my Rubik's Cube watch. I took the stickers off my Rubik's Cube, watched MTV all afternoon, and Daisy Duke in the cutoff jeans. Yes, it was. It was good times. Good times. Doug stops by. Thanks for coming by, Doug. Brian says, I don't think I could stand and watch the Cubs stink again for 40 years or have to watch the final 3 games of the 84 NCLS against the Padres. Yeah. Yeah, well, there's definitely things you don't want to go back and do. All those heartaches of the Bruins I watched. I remember, was it 1981? Bruins had home ice advantage against the Islanders, and the Islanders took both games in Boston. I was just like, what? How do we lose both games at home? You're supposed to win both games at home as a top seed. That's the year the Islanders think they went on to win the Cup. And I remember my stepfather went into the Bruins game with somebody else. And he's like, yeah, my mother says, hey, guess where your stepfather's going tonight? I said, not the Bruins playoff game. He's like, yeah. He goes, but unfortunately, he's taken somebody else in because it was their tickets. So it wasn't his choice. So I didn't go to that game either. But yeah, to go back and watch the heartache of the Red Sox and the Bruins and the Patriots to a lesser degree would be kind of tough. There was not a lot of championships in Boston until Brady arrived. A couple of Celtics here and there, but I thought it was an interesting question, and I just kind of was wondering what people thought. Like, what would you do? Would you tell anybody? Would you just keep it to yourself? I mean, as a 13-year-old, you're limited to what you can do. That's the thing. If you were 18 or 19, it's different, but you're 13. Back in, however you old you are, 70s, 80s, and 90s, it's very restrictive on a 13-year-old. It really is. You can't really quit school. They make you go to school because you're not 16 yet. But you have all the knowledge to go and get through life or whatever you're doing for a job. You could probably go do that job like right now. So if you were 13, then they could have the proverbial, we want someone who's 20 years old with 15 years experience. You could be that guy because you're like, hey, I've done my job for 30 years, even though I'm only 13 years old. And let's flip the switch here for a second. What if someone come up to you, like today, and said, hey, I'm from the future. Now, one of your buddies, let's just say you got a 50-year-old buddy, and he goes, hey, I'm really 80. I'm not 50 anymore, I'm 80. When I went to bed last night, I was 80 years old in the nursing home or wherever, a retirement home, and now I'm back in my 50-year-old body. Would you believe him? So if you were trying to convince somebody that you are not 13 years old, could you believe him? And Dwayne says, yeah, buy Apple and Walmart stock. Yeah. I mean, tell Ted Turner not to fire Joe Torre. Yep. Noble, being a Cub, it wouldn't hurt as bad as knowing 2016 was going to happen. Maybe. But again, like I said, there's no guarantee the timeline's going to stay the same, but most likely it wouldn't change too much as far as, sports and things that were going on in the world. I just thought it was an interesting question. And how would I convince someone that I was telling the truth? And even if I did convince them, would they be out of their mind thinking about this? Would they be like, okay, I'm blown away? Like, I know I would be. If someone knocked on my door and said, yeah, hi, Dave. Yeah, I'm really my 80-year-old self. And let me tell you a few things. And they probably would completely convince me that they were being authentic, but I still probably wouldn't believe them. I mean, how can you? It's such a wild, wild story. But I thought it'd be fun to come on and talk about this tonight and just see what people thought. If you woke up tomorrow as your 13-year-old self and had all the knowledge of today, you probably would be rich. If you were smart about things, you'd be rich. Let's just face it. If you really thought about how to proceed with this, you should come out of this rich. Whether it's betting on sports teams or using the knowledge that you have for other things or stock markets or whatever, you really should come out of it with okay money because you know kind of what's going to happen. Like the Yahoo. You jump on Yahoo right away. Then get out of that and jump on Google. And then, jump on Apple, and follow all these stocks around and get in while they're on the ground floor. McDonald's, things like that. I don't know. It's something to think about here. What would you do? Who'd be the first? The other things. Who'd be the first? Would you tell anybody? Would you tell anybody? And what would be the? How would you approach them? How would you approach them and say, hey? Noble said you would have to tell them an event that's going to happen in the future. Okay. Yeah, that would be one thing. So I suppose you could, tell them who's going to win the Super Bowl. But then again, depending on when you told them, if you told them the day of the game, you get a 50-50 chance. So they might not even believe you then. But yeah, you'd have to tell them something about them that they know that you did not know. And you might have to say a few things. You really might. So I just thought it'd be a fun it's something different, now gaming wise, yeah, I would go back and look into the Strat and the APA games and learn those, and play those so I could, see what it was like playing those games way back in the day, like before the internet and before that. I think that'd be kind of fun, even though it'd probably be really expensive as a 13-year-old to try to buy that stuff, but. It might be kind of fun because, again, without the internet, that's when those games really shined. Playing them right here in front of you without all the computers and stuff, that's when it would probably be kind of fun. That's when you could show people games. Now it's so hard to show somebody a game like that just because of the technology. Everybody's on their phone and on the computer and internet and all that other stuff and PC games. It's so hard to show somebody a tabletop game. It really is, but... Anyway, I'm going to jump out here. I just jumped on tonight real quick to say hi and throw this question out at you. And let me know what you think. Throw this out. What if you woke up tomorrow as your 13-year-old self and had all the knowledge of today? What would you do? Who would you tell? How would you handle it? Let me know. I'm interested. That would be a fun question to throw out to the community. And Noble, before we go, Noble says he played a 73 Cubs season of Strat. That's kind of cool. Yep. I saw the ads in the newspaper, in the magazines back in the day for Strat, but I never knew what it was, so I never pursued it. But anyway, I'm Dave. Let me know what you think to this question here. Be interested to see what you guys think. I always love like off the wall topics like this and see what people think about it. So we'll talk to everybody later. Bye-bye.